All right, so we need to talk a little bit more about evolution. So far, you've learned about natural selection, did a couple things on that. Hopefully, that concept is making sense to you um, because evolution is very much based in natural selection. Evolution pretty much works through natural selection. You've also watched that video that was all about how humans have evolved over time, or at least how we think the leading ideas of how humans have evolved over time. And so the next thing we need to do is talk about what evidence do we have that this whole evolution thing is actually happening. We do have a number of pieces of evidence, and we're going to talk about those. So I'm going to split these notes up into 3 days worth of videos. So today will be, I'll try to keep them as short as I can. Here I am blabbing, making it long already. Um, anyway, this will be 3 days worth of stuff. Now, in class, normally I would have you write this stuff down in your notebook because it would be useful on a test that we would be taking later. But obviously, we're not in class and I'm not giving you tests. And so if you want to write it in your notebook, go for it. If you don't want to, that's fine. But you will have a quiz in Canvas. So, in addition to watching this video, you will have some questions to answer there. You can watch the video and answer those questions at the same time. That's fine with me. Write stuff down if you want to. Yeah, that's about it. So here we go. Evidence for evolution. So first off, we need to talk about the theory of evolution. Now, a lot of times people say, well, evolution is just a theory. Like, why evolution isn't true? It's just a theory. Well, the thing is that people don't understand that scientists use the word theory differently than most people do. Most people use the word theory to mean like just a guess at what's happening. For scientists, though, a theory is an in depth explanation of something, and it has to be based on a number of facts, and those facts have to be repeatedly confirmed through observation and experimentation. So, for one, theory is in depth. For two, it has to be based on a number of facts. And for three, it has to be repeatedly confirmed through observation and experimentation. So that ends up being a pretty well substantiated thing. Theories, as far as scientists go, are actually pretty well rounded ideas. For scientists, theories are not guesses, but they are reliable accounts of the real world and how the world works in general. All right, so in this class, when we talk about evolution, we're going to define it as genetic change of a population of organisms over time. Okay, so there's a couple things important here. Genetic change, okay, so genetic is important there. It's happening to a population of organisms, it's not just happening to one particular organism. And it also happens over time. Now, over time is generally, for most things, it's a very long period of time. If you are an organism that reproduces quickly, you might be able to evolve a little bit faster. Also, if you have certain environmental pressures, you might evolve a little bit faster. But generally, it takes a long time for evolution to take place. One important thing, I always like to relate it to Pokemon, which I hope is accurate. I'm pretty sure that like Pokemon characters like can evolve, like one individual can evolve and grow and change. Um, but that's not evolution the way we're talking about it because a singular thing is not a population. Okay, so we're talking about a large group over time changing, not an individual changing. This is just sort of a little bit of extra information. Charles Darwin, you're going to hear about him a lot with evolution. The theory of evolution was first formulated by Charles Darwin in his book On the Origin of Species, which is a very important book in biology. And that was in 1859, so that was nearly 200, well, coming up on 200 years ago now. Like, what would that be? 150 years, I guess. Don't quote me on that. Math is not my strong suit. Anyway, continuing the theory of evolution. Evolution by natural selection. Okay, so evolution occurring through the process of natural selection is one of the most well-supported theories in the history of science. There's evidence from a wide variety of disciplines. Those disciplines include paleontology, geology, genetics, and developmental biology. Okay. Uh, the theory has two main points. So, one of the main points is that populations have been modified by natural selection, where some traits are favored over others. Okay, populations have been modified by natural selection, and some traits are favored over others. So if we talk about that real quick, let's think about the moths, right? That population, if you read that Manchester Moths article I gave you last week, 2 weeks ago, last week, um, that population of moths, that population, not just a single moth, the population, they were modified by natural selection when the Industrial Revolution was happening in England and the trees started being covered in that dark soot. The dark colored moths did better, and therefore they were modified because some traits were favored over others. Those dark moths, um, that dark color, that was a trait that was favored over the lighter color. Then, when the trees started lightening back up again, they weren't covered in the dark soot all the time anymore. The lichen came back, and the trees started being lighter in color. That lighter colored moth started doing better again. So again, the population was modified by natural selection because some traits were favored over others. This is a thing that we see um, all the time. This is an observable thing. Okay, so that was one of the main points. The other main point is that all life on Earth is connected and related to each other. So that's sort of the thing that a lot of people struggle with, is that all life on Earth is connected and related to each other. And that is sort of one of the main things that we're going to be talking about in these slides. How do we know that this second part is true? There's a number of ways that we know that, and we can tell that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Well, in these next couple of videos, not today. I'll be talking about them today because I'm recording all these at once, but you'll probably hear about them one by one. So one thing, populations modified, we talked about the moths. All life on Earth is connected and related. I'm actually going to pause my recording here for a second if I can, because I want to show you something. All right, so I'm going to try to leave a link to this thing somewhere if I can figure out how to do it in the YouTube video or in Canvas. If I can't, you can see this link right here. I don't know how to say that. evogeneeo.com/en/explore/tree of life explorer. And that's with hyphens in between everything. So this is a really cool little thing that illustrates the connectedness of everything on the earth. And fun fact about Miss Richard, I have a slightly different version of this tattooed on my leg because I think that this sort of thing is neat. So to sort of familiarize you with it a little bit, first thing we need to realize is the time scale here. So if we look down here, just the way this graph is set up, 4,000 million years ago, so it was about 4 billion years ago, that's Earth birth is what we're calling that. So it's sort of the beginning of the Earth, right? And if you remember the video I had you watch last week about evolution, if you remember, the Earth was around for a while before life popped up. So life pops up right here, right at this little base of the tree. And that was maybe, I don't know, 3 billion years ago, which lines up roughly with what we learned in the video as well. And what's happening is basically, if you remember that video, that first cell replicated and replicated and replicated, and over time, little things branched off. Maybe one cell became a little bit different, so it ended up essentially, over here in the tree, and then another one was a little bit different, ended up over here. Essentially, this is showing things becoming more different from one another. Okay. Now, if we zoom in a little bit, what do you think is going on when these branches end? Well, when the branches end, that is something going extinct. And you'll see a lot of times these branches will end. You'll see these things that say mass extinction. You'll see a lot of things, their lives, the timeline for that particular animal ends at that mass extinction line, because mass extinction means lots of things went extinct. Lots of things ended their family tree, but some things continued on. Okay. Um, and then if we look around the very outside, that's modern day. So this is all sort of branching outward. So this is a long time ago, and as we branch outward this way and branch outward this way, and just sort of out like a, I don't know, a ray of sun or something, everything on the outside is modern day. Okay, so it's basically showing all the connectedness from this very first cell and how it branched out to all of these things that exist today. Now, I should say that where these little branches end on this diagram, if you count those little branch tips, that's way, 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 way less than the actual number of things alive on Earth today. This is just sort of representative. Okay, so like here we have snakes. Now, how many types of snakes are there? Tons. I don't know how many. But there's just one line that represents snakes. In reality, each of these lines could branch off way further from there. You know, how many types of water birds or songbirds or whatever else, frogs, there's all kinds of all these different things. So, where are humans on here? Well, um, if we look at our main groups, we're not a plant, we are a eukaryote. So we know that we're somewhere over here. Everything over here is not eukaryotes. So we have bacteria. You guys kind of know what bacteria are. Archaea are kind of like bacteria. And then we also have protists, which are kind of on the line between eukaryotes and stuff. They're little sort of single-celled things. Anyway, humans are boo all the way over here, nearly at the very end. Okay. Now, does that mean we are more evolved than everything else? Not necessarily. It shows that we're very different from bacteria and stuff like that. But things over here are essentially just more different, not necessarily more evolved. Now, we've probably gone through more changes, so I guess if you consider that more evolved, then you could make that argument. Now, hopefully you're a little bit familiar with this by this point. Here's a cool thing that I want to show you. If you click on any of these little things over here, so let's do, I don't know, salmon. We'll pick a fish. What it'll do is it'll start backing up, and it's going to trace our nearest ancestor. So we'll pick a random picture of a human, and here we're looking at a particular salmon. It shows a lot of its taxonomic information, which we're going to be talking about in a couple weeks. And it shows our last common ancestor. Let's see if I can zoom in here. Let's zoom in this way. Yeah. Sometimes that's one thing. This can be a little bit glitchy and hard to maneuver. So if you're working on this on your computer, yeah, it can be a little bit difficult to do. Luckily, I have a touch screen, so it makes it a little bit easier. Zoom out a little bit. So we can see that the last common ancestor between us and salmon was this dude right here. It doesn't give a name for that particular thing, but that's our most recent common ancestor. So around 430 million years ago, 430 million years ago, we split off from this little dude. This little dude had some babies that ended up leading to humans. They had traits that eventually would have brought it out of the water and, gone through all these changes to become human. And some of its babies, if I can go up, some of its babies stayed in the water and had other changes that made it become a salmon. Okay, I'm going to reset it. look at a couple more. Let's look at something way far away. Let's look at a ginkgo, because ginkgo trees are actually, there's a ton of ginkgo trees in downtown Mishawaka. I believe it'll show a ginkgo leaf. Yeah, if you look at the leaf of that tree right there, you might recognize that. Again, those are common in Mishawaka. So it was 1.6 billion years ago that humans split off on our lineage from this tree. We are 2.9 billionth cousins, 1.7 billion times removed. So we're not very related, but we are related. And here is our last common ancestor. It's a little plant thing. It's going to probably be a multicellular thing by this point. Come on. Probably multicellular by this point. Some of its babies ended up growing roots and leaves and things and becoming trees, and some of its babies probably essentially weren't doing photosynthesis, and that's what led to all these animal varieties over here. The plants did photosynthesis, everything else started eating other things to get its energy rather than getting energy from the sun. So again, 2.9 billionth great grandparent, and we were last related 1.6 billion years ago. I shouldn't say we were last related. We're still related, but that was our most recent common ancestor there. So, I don't know, cool stuff. You can play around with this a little bit if you want, but what I like about this is that it shows all the connectedness for everything that's alive on Earth. Maybe I'll have to throw in a picture of my tattoo on there somewhere because I'm going to show it off. So, yeah, I think that is, and you know what? Let's real quick. Humans, our closest living relative is chimpanzees. Let's click on that to see. Doesn't have to trace it very far. But even though they're our closest living relative, still, we were our most recent common ancestor was around 6.5 million years ago, pretty long time. 284,000th great grandparent. Okay, so that's still quite a lot. Great, 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 284,000 times grandparent. Yeah, and so we're 284,000 cousins 12 times removed. We're related, closer than a lot of things on this thing. Sorry, I guess we're more closely related than a lot of organisms on this tree. But you know, still related. So let's head back to our notes. Explore this if you want. Again, hopefully I'll figure out how to get that link somewhere in there. I believe we have one more slide to talk about today. Yes, this final slide is the main lines of evidence for evolution. So we're going to talk about these in coming days. First off, we're going to talk about paleontology, which is the study of fossils and what fossils can tell us about evolution. Next up, we'll talk about geology, rock strata, and radiometric dating are the specific things we're going to talk about there. We're going to talk about anatomy and how homologous structures exist, basically structures that are similar among many living things that you may not think we're related to. Developmental biology, how our embryos and embryos of other animals develop over time. Genetics, DNA and RNA in all living things. We'll look at some similarities there. Biogeography, which is a distribution of groups of animals and how that kind of relates to evolution and whatnot. And then finally, immunology, which is actually pretty pertinent right now as we're dealing with COVID. We can directly observe evolution in things that reproduce really quickly. For instance, bacteria and viruses. How they can evolve to get around our immune system and be super extra contagious. Weird that we're experiencing that right now. Anyway, so those are the things we're going to be talking about the next couple days. Remember, there is a quiz in Canvas that you'll need to complete with this. Again, you can watch a video and do that quiz at the same time, so hopefully it shouldn't take you too long. Come back tomorrow and we'll continue.